The galaxy was silent, cold, and endless. Stars burned far away like tiny candles, and planets moved quietly around them. But in that peaceful darkness, something different happened one night. A broken signal traveled through the emptiness of space. It was weak, full of static, and hard to understand, but there was one thing clear in it: fear. Someone far away was crying for help. The voice was trembling, full of desperation. It came from a planet called Varin, home to a gentle race known as the Varin people. They were peaceful beings who loved art, knowledge, and harmony. They had never built weapons, never trained soldiers, and never imagined that war could ever reach their quiet world. But now they were being attacked by a cruel force, the Dreth Dominion, a race that destroyed planets and conquered worlds without mercy. The message repeated again and again, growing weaker each time. "Please, anyone. They are killing us. We need help." It was a voice full of terror, fading slowly like the last breath of someone drowning. Most of the powerful empires in the galaxy received the signal, but none of them answered. They all thought the same thing, and it was too far, too dangerous, and not their problem. The Varin were not warriors. Helping them meant facing the Dreth, and no one wanted that kind of trouble. So one by one, the empires turned their communication systems off, pretending they had never heard the cry, but far away. In a small blue system filled with life and chaos, the message reached Earth. Inside the Earth Command Center, a young technician named Liam noticed the strange signal first. He played it through the speakers, and everyone in the control room went silent. The static buzzed, and then the same trembling voice spoke again. It was so full of fear that it sent chills down their spines. Liam looked at his commander, unsure of what to do. "Sir," he said quietly, "it's a distress call." The commander didn't respond at first. He just stared at the holographic map of the galaxy, where a red blinking dot showed the Varin system. "Do we have any connection with them?" he asked. "None, sir," said another officer. "But their message is broadcasting on every open frequency. It's not a trap. They're really begging for help." The room fell silent again. Everyone knew what that meant. A decision had to be made. The commander leaned back in his chair, his eyes full of thought. Humanity had come a long way since it first entered the stars. They were strong, brave, and known throughout the galaxy as the Deathworlders, the people from the most dangerous planet. Other races feared them because humans could survive anything: poison, storms, hunger, war. But not everyone saw them as heroes. Many saw them as violent and unpredictable. Humans had always been misunderstood, but this time something was different. This was not a fight for power or resources. This was a cry for life. The commander finally stood up and said, "Forward this to the Defense Council. Tell them it's not just noise. Someone is dying out there." The words moved fast across human colonies, and soon news channels started talking about it. "Alien race under attack," said one headline. "Distress call from Varin system. Ignored by the galaxy, heard by Earth," said another. For the first time in years, humans everywhere felt something deep inside: empathy. They remembered what it meant to be human. In the following hours, meetings were held in government halls, war rooms, and even small community centers. People argued, some saying it was not their business, others saying it was their moral duty. But the decision became clear when an old soldier stood up during one of the council meetings and said, "If we ignore this, we're no better than the monsters attacking them." His words echoed in the silent room, and no one could disagree. Orders were sent to the fleet headquarters. "Prepare for deployment," the message said. Mission code Hope Rising. It was simple but powerful. Humanity had decided to answer the call. The Deathworlder fleet, the most feared and respected force in the known galaxy, was being summoned again. Not for conquest, but for compassion. Back on Earth, families watched as massive ships lifted off from spaceports heading toward orbit. Children waved flags, not knowing where those ships were going, only that their heroes were leaving to help someone in need. The sky filled with bright streaks of fire as the ships broke through the atmosphere, joining hundreds of others waiting above. It was a sight that made people proud and afraid at the same time. Meanwhile, on the Varin homeworld, the situation was getting worse. The Dreth forces had surrounded the cities. Fire covered the skies, and people ran through the streets screaming, hiding, praying. The Varin had no weapons, only hope. They kept sending their message into space, even when their communication towers were falling one by one. "Please, someone hear us." whispered the last operator before the tower exploded behind her. Light years away aboard the command ship Valor's Edge, Admiral Rhea Solon stood before her crew. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned with determination. "We received their cry," she said. "No one else will come, so we will." The crew cheered softly, their hearts heavy but ready. They knew what this meant. A journey into danger, maybe death. But no one stepped back. Not a single one. As the fleet prepared for warp jump, Liam, the same technician who found the message, looked out the viewport one last time. Earth was shrinking behind them, a small blue dot surrounded by stars. He whispered quietly, "Let's bring them hope." Then, the engines roared, and in a flash of light, the Deathworlder fleet disappeared into the darkness, heading toward the unknown. Across the galaxy, other species watched in silence. They couldn't believe it. The humans were actually going. No one else had dared. Some called them foolish, others brave, but deep down everyone knew something was changing. The Deathworlders were once feared for their strength, but now they were being watched for something even stronger: their heart. The distress call that had started as a faint whisper now carried meaning beyond words. It had reached those who understood pain, loss, and courage better than anyone else, and somewhere in the deep black of space, the universe itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting to see what would happen when the Deathworlders arrived. The war had not yet begun, but hope had already taken its first breath. When the news of the distress signal from the Varine reached every corner of human space, something began to move deep inside the hearts of millions. It was not just curiosity, it was emotion. It reminded people of the time when humanity had once been weak, desperate, and alone, when no one had come to save them. Now they were no longer helpless. They had strength, they had fleets, and most importantly, they had the will to protect. The cry for help from that small alien planet had become a voice that touched every human soul. Across Earth and the colonies, discussions turned into decisions. Commanders woke up in the middle of the night to messages marked as Priority 1. Shipyards came alive with flashing lights and roaring engines. Soldiers were called from rest, engineers from sleep, and scientists from their labs. Everyone knew something big was coming. The Deathworlder fleet was gathering again, humanity's strongest arm in the galaxy, but this time it wasn't for war of power or territory. It was for something much purer: to save lives. In the central military base, Admiral Rhea Solon stood before the massive screen showing the map of the galaxy. Red dots showed the Dreth Dominion's expansion, spreading like a disease. A single blue light blinked weakly near the edge, the Vahrin homeworld. Rhea stared at it for a long moment before speaking to her team. "This is where they are dying," she said quietly, "and this is where we'll make our stand." Her voice was calm but filled with strength that made everyone in the room straighten their backs. She had led countless missions before, but this one felt different. It was not just strategy, it was heart. Within hours, ships began to prepare for departure. The Valor's Edge, Rhea's flagship, stood in orbit like a silent giant. Its hull was scarred from old battles, but its engines glowed brighter than ever. Around it, hundreds of ships formed: old destroyers, new cruisers, carriers, and medical vessels. They came from every human colony: Mars, Europa, Titan, even the farthest outposts near the rim. Every ship carried not only weapons but also supplies: food, medicine, shelters, because humanity was not coming just to fight. They were coming to heal. In one of the hangars, a group of young pilots gathered, checking their fighter crafts. Among them was Lieutenant Juno Ray, one of the youngest pilots in the fleet. She looked at the stars beyond the glass wall and whispered, "Those aliens, they must be so scared." Her friend beside her smiled weakly. "And we're the monsters coming to save them," he said, half joking, half serious. Humans were known as Deathworlders, survivors from a world filled with danger. Other species called them that out of fear, but among themselves they carried it with pride. They were the ones who didn't give up, no matter what. As the ships lined up for jump preparation, a broadcast from Earth Command played on every screen. It showed the old Earth flag waving behind the commander, who spoke with steady emotion. "To all who have chosen to answer the call," he said, "remember this. We fight not for glory, not for power, but because someone cried for help. And we listened. We are Deathworlders. We don't turn away from suffering." The words hit hard. Soldiers saluted, civilians wept, and the engines roared louder as if they too felt the meaning of the mission. Back on Earth, families stood outside watching the sky. Massive ships lifted one after another, their lights glowing through the clouds like shooting stars. Children held hands pointing at the sky, asking where the ships were going. Parents told them softly, "They're going to help someone who's in trouble." In that moment, it didn't matter how far away the Vahrin were. Humanity felt united, by purpose, by compassion, and by courage. In space, the fleet grew larger. Old retired warships were reactivated from storage. Some of them were decades old, carrying the marks of old wars. Engineers worked day and night to get them running. "She's old, but she'll fly," one mechanic said proudly, patting the side of a ship named Defiance. Others brought smaller crafts, converted transport ships into rescue vessels. Even civilian traders offered their ships to join the convoy. No one was forced. They all volunteered. Meanwhile, messages started coming in from alien species across the stars. Some wished humanity luck. Others warned them not to interfere. "You cannot stand against the Dreth," one ambassador said coldly. "They will crush you." But Ria's answer was short. "Let them try." Her words became a spark that spread through the fleet. Every soldier began to feel it, that quiet burning inside their chest that only humans could carry. They had been underestimated before. They were used to it. But this time, they would remind the galaxy who they truly were. In the training decks of the Valor's Edge, soldiers sharpened their skills. Holograms of Dreth warriors appeared before them as they practiced combat. "Remember," said the instructor, "they're stronger, faster, but they don't have what we do, heart. When you fight, fight for the ones who called for you." Every soldier nodded. Some wrote letters to their families. Others prayed in silence. They didn't know if they would return, but they all knew why they were going. As the final preparations completed, Admiral Rhea stood on the bridge, looking out at the massive fleet surrounding her ship. Thousands of lights glimmered against the black of space, each one a symbol of human will. Her second-in-command approached quietly. "Admiral, the fleet is ready." Rhea nodded. "Then we begin." A communication channel opened across all ships. Rhea's face appeared on every screen. Calm, composed, but full of fire. "To every soul aboard this fleet," she said, "today we answer a call that others ignored. We are not saviors or conquerors. We are guardians of life. When the Varin cried for help, no one listened, except us. Remember that when you see the enemy. Remember that when fear tries to take you. You are Deathworlders, children of storms, survivors of chaos. Let the galaxy see what that means." The soldiers cheered, their voices echoing through every deck, every hallway. Pilots climbed into their cockpits. Technicians ran final checks. Medical officers loaded supplies. The entire fleet moved as one living organism, breathing, pulsing, ready. The stars outside seemed to grow brighter as the engines began to glow blue and white. Liam, the young technician who had first heard the Varian signal, stood beside a large window on the observation deck. He remembered the first time he played that broken message. Now he was part of something far greater than himself. "We heard you," he whispered softly. "We're coming." As the countdown began, the massive engines charged with energy. The hum grew louder, vibrating through every wall. "All ships prepare for hyperspace jump," came the command. The space in front of them began to shimmer, bending like water under heat. "Jump in 3, 2, 1, and then, in a burst of light, the Deathworlder fleet vanished from orbit. Thousands of ships disappeared into the vast dark, leaving behind only silence. The people watching from Earth could see their last glowing trails fading like stars falling into the night. It was beautiful and terrifying at the same time. Somewhere far away, the Vahrin still waited in fear, unaware that help was already on the way. But soon they would see the sky above their burning cities light up again, not with enemy fire, but with the arrival of humanity. The Deathworlders were coming, not as destroyers, but as protectors. And for the first time in galactic history, the universe was about to witness what happened when the children of a dangerous world chose to fight. Not for themselves, but for others. The moment the Deathworlder fleet came out of hyperspace, the stars stretched back into their places, and the blackness of the Vahrin system filled the screens. What they saw made every human on board fall silent. The Vahrin homeworld was burning. Great clouds of fire covered the cities, and pieces of debris floated in orbit like ashes. The Dreth Dominion's ships hung above the planet, dark and sharp, firing beams of red light down at the surface. It was a scene of pure destruction. Admiral Rhea Solan's jaw tightened as she watched. "We're late," she said quietly. But not too late. The communication channels burst alive with reports. "Reading multiple enemy signatures," shouted the sensor officer. "They've established a blockade around the planet. Heavy cruisers, destroyers, and at least one capital ship." The bridge crew waited for Rhea's command. She looked at the burning world again and spoke clearly. "Deploy the fleet. Defensive wings 1 and 2, forward position. Carriers launch fighters. Medical ships stay behind the line. We're going in." Her voice carried no hesitation. She knew the enemy was stronger, but retreat was not an option. Humanity had come too far to turn back now. The space around the Varine planet exploded into chaos. Human ships moved into formation, engines glowing blue against the darkness. The Dreth noticed the sudden arrival and turned their weapons toward them. A deep mechanical voice came through the open channel. "This world is ours. Leave now or die." Rhea answered calmly. "You attacked the helpless. You brought war to the innocent. We're here to end it." The line went silent for a moment, then filled with laughter. "Then die with them," the Dreth commander replied. And then the war began. The first Dreth missiles shot forward, streaking across space like burning comets. Human defense ships immediately moved to intercept. Explosions lit up the void, shaking smaller crafts. Fighter squadrons flew out from carriers in tight formations, darting between laser beams. Lieutenant Juno Ray led one of the fighter wings. Her voice came over the comms, steady but fierce. "Squadron 3, take the left flank. Cover the medical ships." Her small craft twisted and turned, firing bursts of plasma toward the enemy. One Dreth fighter exploded right in front of her, and she shouted, "That's for Varine." On the ground below, the Varin people saw flashes in the sky. For the first time in weeks, those lights were not falling bombs. They were the lights of hope. Children hiding in basements looked up through broken ceilings and whispered, "They came. Someone came." Their parents cried quietly, unable to believe it. Back in orbit, the battle intensified. The Deathworlder fleet fought like no one had ever seen before. The humans were fewer in number, but they fought with precision and courage. Every pilot, every soldier, every commander had only one thought: protect the innocent. The Dreth ships were massive and heavily armored, but they lacked heart. They fought for domination. The humans fought for life. Aboard the Valor's Edge, alarms blared as the ship took a heavy hit. "Shields down to 60%, shouted an officer. Sparks flew across the bridge, but Rhea didn't flinch. "Redirect power to the forward cannons," she ordered. "Target their command vessel." The gunners locked onto a massive Dreth ship at the center of the enemy formation. "Target locked," they said. Rhea raised her hand and brought it down sharply. "Fire." The cannons unleashed blinding beams of light that tore through space and slammed into the Dreth command ship. The explosion was enormous, shaking even distant vessels. The Dreth fleet hesitated for a moment. Their leader was gone. That single moment was enough for the Deathworlders to strike harder. "Push forward," Rhea commanded. "Don't give them time to breathe." Fighters dove between enemy lines, firing missiles at weak spots. Destroyers moved in close, exchanging brutal fire. The space around the planet turned into a storm of fire and light. Even as ships exploded and pieces of metal spun wildly, the humans kept advancing. Every time a ship fell, another took its place. The spirit of the Deathworlders burned stronger than ever. Juno's squadron managed to break through the Dreth line near the southern orbit. "We've got a gap," she shouted. "Repeat, we've opened a path for the evacuation ships." Immediately, transport vessels began descending toward the planet to rescue survivors. On board one of those transports, Liam, the technician who first found the distress call, watched the smoke-covered world below. "Hang on," he whispered. "We're here now." The transports entered the atmosphere, dodging enemy fire. They landed near the ruins of the capital city, where the remaining Varine huddled together. The door opened, and human soldiers in dark armor stepped out. One of the Varine, shaking and covered in dust, whispered, Are you here to save us?" The soldier smiled softly under her helmet. "Yes, you called and we came." While the evacuation continued, the space battle grew more violent. The Dreth brought in reinforcements from the edge of the system. Massive ships appeared, larger than anything the humans had seen before. One of them fired a plasma beam that tore through 2 human destroyers at once. Rhea clenched her fists. "They want a war?" she said under her breath. "We'll give them one." She contacted the entire fleet. "All ships, this is Admiral Solon. We hold the line here. No one steps back. As long as one of us is standing, they won't take that planet. Her words reignited the spirit of every fighter in the fleet. Pilots screamed battle cries. Gunners fired with renewed strength. Even wounded engineers worked through pain to keep systems running. Down on the planet, Liam's team was loading Varan families into the transport ships. One small child clung to his arm, refusing to let go. "Please don't leave us," she cried. Liam knelt down and said, "I promise we won't leave anyone behind." Then he gently carried her onto the ship and looked up at the burning sky. He could see faint flashes of the battle above, humans fighting for strangers they had never met. Hours passed, and both sides suffered heavy losses. The human fleet was damaged, but the Dreth were beginning to fall back. Their ships were breaking formation, their attacks growing weaker. They had not expected such resistance, not from humans. "How can they still fight?" one Dreth officer shouted. "They should have surrendered by now." But they didn't understand. Humans didn't surrender when lives were on the line. Rhea saw the change on her tactical display. "They're pulling back," she said, her voice steady. "Don't let them escape." The fleet advanced, driving the Dreth toward the outer orbit. Fighters chased retreating enemies, firing until their ammo ran out. The Valor's Edge launched one final barrage, destroying the last enemy cruiser near the planet. And then, suddenly, silence. The battlefield went quiet except for the sound of damaged ships crackling and engines fading. The humans had done it. The Dreth were gone, at least for now. The skies above Varan were clear again. On the surface, the surviving Varin looked up, tears streaming down their faces as the black clouds of war began to fade. In the command room of the Valor's Edge, the crew sat in silence, exhausted but proud. Rhea looked at the image of the blue planet below, now half covered in smoke but still alive. "We did what we came for," she said softly. "We answered their cry." Liam's voice came through the comms from the surface. "Evacuation complete, Admiral?" "We've saved as many as we could." His tone was tired but filled with relief. Rhea smiled faintly. "Good work, everyone. Today, the Deathworlders proved what they truly are. The battle for Vahrin had been won, but everyone knew it was not the end. The Dreth Dominion would not forget this defeat. They would come back stronger. Yet at that moment, none of that mattered. The humans had given hope to a world that had already accepted death. They had shown the galaxy something no one expected, that the most feared species in the universe also had the greatest heart. As the fleet began repair operations and medical teams worked tirelessly, a soft message came from the planet. It was from the Varan survivors. "To the Deathworlders," it said, "you did not just save our lives. You gave us back our faith." For the first time in a long while, Admiral Rhea Solon allowed herself to smile fully. The war was far from over, but humanity had already won something greater than victory. They had reminded the universe what compassion looked like, even in the middle of fire. The night was silent, but inside her heart a storm was roaring. Sarah couldn't sleep. She kept turning on her bed, her mind filled with all the memories of her past. Every tear that rolled down her cheek carried the pain she had buried for years. She thought she had moved on, but deep down she knew she was still holding on to the pieces of her broken heart. The world saw her as strong and confident, but inside she was fighting battles no one could see. Sometimes she wished she could just scream and let everything out, but she had learned to smile instead. That smile had become her shield, her way of surviving in a world that had given her more pain than comfort. As she looked at the ceiling, she remembered the days when everything felt simple, when laughter was real and her dreams were big. But life had changed her. The betrayal, the loneliness, the disappointment, it had all shaped her into someone who no longer believed in fairy tales. Still, a small part of her heart whispered that maybe one day things could be different, that maybe pain had a purpose, that maybe Allah was preparing her for something greater. The next morning she stood in front of the mirror. Her eyes were tired, but her reflection was calm. She whispered to herself, "No matter what happens, I'll rise again." It wasn't just a promise, it was a decision. She decided to stop living in her past and start creating her future. The wounds were still there, but now she saw them as signs of survival, not weakness. Every scar told a story of how she didn't give up. That day she went out for a walk after a long time. The morning breeze touched her face gently, as if reminding her that life was still beautiful. She looked around and noticed little things she had ignored for years. The sound of birds, the smell of flowers, the laughter of children playing. It was as if Allah was showing her signs that she still had a reason to live, to smile, to hope. On her way back, she met an old woman sitting by the roadside, selling handmade bracelets. The woman smiled and said, "Beta, this one is for people who have seen pain but still shine." Sarah smiled softly and bought that bracelet. It wasn't just a piece of jewelry, it was a reminder of her strength. Days passed and Sarah began to rebuild her life slowly. She started writing again, something she had stopped years ago. Her words became her therapy. Every line she wrote helped her release a piece of her pain. Her notebook became her silent friend, the only one who truly understood her. Through her writing, she began to heal. She wrote about her dreams, her fears, her prayers, and her faith. One evening while she was writing, she got a message from her childhood friend Am. They hadn't talked much in years, but Am's message felt like a warm hug. "I was just thinking about you," it said. Sarah smiled for the first time in days. They talked for hours, laughing about old memories and sharing their struggles. Am reminded her of who she used to be, hopeful, brave, full of dreams. That conversation changed something inside Sarah. It was like a spark of light in a dark tunnel. A&M encouraged her to believe in herself again, to keep walking even when the road felt endless. And for the first time in a long time, Sarah felt seen. She realized that Allah had sent Anam at the right time, as a reminder that no pain lasts forever. One night, Sarah sat on her rooftop looking at the stars. The city lights shimmered below, but her eyes were fixed on the sky. "Ya Allah," she whispered, "thank you for giving me another chance. I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I trust you." There was peace in her heart that she hadn't felt in years. The same girl who once cried herself to sleep was now learning to find joy in the small things. She began to focus on her health too. She started exercising, eating better, and spending more time outdoors. Each day she felt lighter, not just in her body but in her soul. It wasn't easy, but she was learning that healing isn't about forgetting the pain. It's about growing through it. Sometimes she still had bad days, days when memories came back like waves, when loneliness crept in, when her heart ached. But now she handled it differently. Instead of breaking down, she prayed. Instead of hiding her tears, she let them flow. And when she couldn't find words, she simply said, "Allah knows." That sentence became her comfort, her strength. Her faith became stronger than her fear. She realized that everything that had broken her once was actually teaching her something important. The people who left taught her to rely only on Allah. The pain taught her patience. The loneliness taught her self-love. And the silence taught her peace. Months later, she found herself smiling without a reason. Her laughter came back naturally. Her heart was lighter, her eyes brighter. She wasn't the same girl anymore. She was stronger, wiser, and more grateful. One day, she visited her old school with Anam. As they walked through the corridors, memories rushed back. The laughter, the mischief, the dreams they once had. Anam looked at her and said, "You've changed, Sarah, but in the best way." Sarah smiled. Maybe that's what pain does. It breaks you just enough to rebuild you into something better. They both sat under the same old tree where they used to spend their school breaks. The wind was soft and the leaves whispered like old friends. For the first time, Sarah wasn't thinking about what she lost. She was thankful for what she had become. As the sun began to set, she closed her eyes and felt peace deep inside her heart. She realized that her story wasn't about pain anymore, it was about transformation. It was about how Allah took her broken pieces and turned them into strength. She had learned that sometimes Allah delays certain blessings not to punish us, but to prepare us. That night she wrote in her diary, "I'm no longer waiting for someone to save me. Allah already did." And as she looked at her reflection once again, she saw not a broken girl, but a woman who had survived everything meant to destroy her. Her journey wasn't over yet, but she was no longer afraid of the unknown. She had learned to walk with faith. Every day was a new chance to heal, to grow, and to become closer to Allah. And deep inside, she knew one truth that would guide her forever. No pain is wasted when you trust Allah's plan. Life had tested her, but it also taught her the real meaning of strength. She was no longer the girl defined by her wounds. She was the woman who turned them into wisdom. And that, she realized, was the most beautiful transformation of all. Months passed, and Sarah's life began to bloom like spring after a long, cold winter. Every sunrise now carried a new promise for her heart. She had learned how to live again, but this time with peace, faith, and purpose. Her mornings began with prayer, soft whispers to Allah, thanking Him for strength and guidance. She no longer woke up with sadness. Instead, she woke up with gratitude. Life was still not perfect, but her heart had found balance. The girl who once cried every night now found herself smiling at the smallest blessings. The smell of morning, tea, the call to prayer, the warmth of sunlight on her face. Sarah had started helping others too. She began visiting a small community center near her home, where she would spend her weekends teaching children how to read and write. Those little faces, full of innocence and dreams, reminded her of herself. Whenever she looked into their eyes, she saw hope, pure and untouched by the harshness of life. It made her realize that giving back brought more happiness than receiving ever did. She was no longer chasing success or perfection. She was chasing peace and purpose. One day, as she was walking home from the center, she saw a little girl sitting by the road crying. Her clothes were torn and she looked lost. Without hesitation, Sarah sat beside her and asked gently, "What happened, Beta?" The girl wiped her tears and said, "I lost my doll. It was my only friend." Sarah smiled softly, took her hand, and said, "Then today you found a new one." The girl looked confused at first, but when Sarah took her to a nearby shop and bought her a new doll, her face lit up with pure joy. That moment filled Sarah's heart with a warmth she hadn't felt in years. That night, when she returned home, she couldn't stop thinking about that little girl. She realized how small acts of kindness could bring light into someone's darkness. She prayed to Allah and said, "Ya Allah, use me to spread kindness, even if it's in small ways." From that day forward, she made it a habit to do one good deed every day, sometimes helping someone cross the street, sometimes just giving a smile to a stranger. It made her feel alive again. Slowly, Sarah started to dream again. She began working on her passion, storytelling. She had always loved to write, and now she decided to share her stories with the world. Late at night, when everyone was asleep, she would sit with her notebook and pen, writing stories inspired by her journey, stories of faith, pain, healing, and hope. She uploaded her first story online under a simple title, "The Girl Who Found Herself." She didn't expect much, but within days, hundreds of people read it and left kind comments. Many said her words gave them hope during their darkest times. Sarah couldn't believe it. Her pain had turned into something beautiful. It was now healing others. She often sat on her balcony at night, looking at the stars. Each star felt like a reminder that no matter how dark the night gets, light always finds a way to shine. She thought about her past, the heartbreak, the loneliness, the tears, and instead of feeling sad, she felt thankful. If she hadn't gone through all that pain, she wouldn't have become who she was today. One evening, while she was writing, she received a message from someone who had read her story. It said, "I was about to give up on life, but your words stopped me. Thank you for reminding me that Allah is still with me." Tears filled her eyes. She whispered softly, "Alhamdulillah." That message was a sign. Her story wasn't just for her, it was meant to touch others too. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Sarah's writing began to reach more people. She started a small YouTube channel where she narrated emotional and spiritual stories, encouraging people to stay strong, trust Allah, and never give up. Her voice carried sincerity, and her words carried experience. She wasn't just speaking, she was sharing her soul. People began to call her the voice of hope. Her friend Anam supported her every step of the way. They would often spend evenings together talking about dreams, faith, and life. One day Am said, "Sarah, you're glowing these days." Sarah laughed softly and said, "Maybe it's because I finally stopped running from my past. I accepted it, and now I'm free." They both laughed, but deep down, they knew how far she had come. Am had seen her at her lowest, and now she was watching her rise. Sarah's journey became an example that pain can either break you or build you. It depends on how you face it. One rainy afternoon, Sarah stood by her window, watching raindrops slide down the glass. The sound of rain always made her heart calm. She thought about how rain washes away the dust and brings freshness, just like Allah's mercy washes away pain and brings new beginnings. She smiled and whispered, Ya Allah, thank you for every storm that made me stronger. Her parents noticed her change too. They saw the peace in her eyes, the smile that once was missing. Her mother said, I don't know what you've done, but you look so happy now. Sarah hugged her tightly and said, I just stopped asking, why me, and started saying, try me, Ya Allah. Her heart had learned that surrendering to Allah's will doesn't mean giving up. It means trusting that He knows better, and that trust gave her a kind of peace no one could take away. One day she received an invitation from a local event to speak about her journey. She hesitated at first. The thought of standing in front of a crowd made her nervous, but then she remembered how once she couldn't even face herself in the mirror, and now she was being asked to inspire others. She knew this was Allah's way of showing how far she had come. So, she agreed. On the day of the event, as she stood on stage holding the microphone, her hands trembled for a moment, but then she looked around and saw the audience, people just like her, carrying silent battles. She took a deep breath and began. There was a time when I thought my pain would destroy me, but now I know it was preparing me. Allah doesn't waste any pain. Every tear you cry, every prayer you whisper, He hears it all. Her voice was soft but full of strength. The hall was silent, everyone listening closely. Some people even had tears in their eyes. By the time she finished, the audience stood up and clapped. Sarah's heart swelled with gratitude. It wasn't fame or applause that made her happy. It was knowing that her story had helped someone believe again. That night, when she returned home, she sat down with her diary and wrote, This is not the end. This is just the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with faith, love, and purpose. She closed her eyes and whispered, Alhamdulillah. As time passed, Sarah continued her journey, not toward perfection, but toward peace. She knew that life would still bring challenges, but now she was ready. She had Allah, she had faith, and she had herself. And that was enough. Sometimes she still visited that old tree at her school with They would sit quietly, watching the sunset, and smile at how far they had come. Every sunset reminded her that endings are just beginnings in disguise. Sarah's story wasn't about pain anymore. It was about power. It was about how a broken girl found herself through faith and turned her scars into strength. She learned that when you trust Allah's timing, everything falls into place. Not too soon, not too late, but exactly when it's meant to. And so, with a peaceful heart and a hopeful soul, Sarah continued her journey, not searching for happiness anymore, but living in gratitude for every breath, every sunrise, and every moment Allah allowed her to begin again.